Today I'm going to quote, I'm going to cite, and I'm going to refer, and I'm going to comment on a super important article from The Atlantic titled, How a Plan to Save the Power System Disappeared. A federal lab found a way to modernize the grid, reduce reliance on coal, and save consumers billions. Then, Trump appointees blocked it. By Peter Fairley, August 20th, 2020. And this is true. And this is super important to know for two reasons. More than two. But two primary reasons. One is how we could have a cleaner, less polluted, more energy efficient future. Could have had one by now already, for that matter. And two, how the Trump administration, which in my opinion is propped up by the reckless elements of the business community, is sabotaging that. Second to that sabotaging point is that they are waging a war on information. Not an info war like someone else's show. They're waging a war on information. And they are able to get away with doing that by claiming we're battling the deep state. When really, what they're doing is using political appointees with industry connections to bully lower-ranking civil servants. Quoting from the article, a nearly impermeable electrical seam. That's the science narration accent I sometimes slip into. A nearly impermeable electrical seam divides America's eastern and western power grids. These giant pools of alternating current on either side of the Rockies contain a total of 950 gigawatts of power generation by thousands of power plants, but only a little over 1 gigawatt can cross between them. That separation raises power costs and makes it hard to share growing surpluses of environmentally friendly energy. Wind and solar. And years of neglect have left the grids and the few connections between them overloaded and ill-prepared to transition to highly variable renewable energy. So in that quote alone, we see the answer, or part of the answer, to that age-old problem the denial industry likes to put out. We can't use renewable because the sun ain't always shining and the wind ain't always blowing. Well, here it is. You interconnect that power grid. You upgrade and interconnect the power grid. Back to the article. 7 aging converter stations mediates a meager power flows across the east and west seam, as our German professor. But to that, a solution has been in the works. At the American National Renewable Energy Laboratory, a study was underway. Aaron Bloom, the NREL, or National Renewable Energy Laboratory, project leader, and Joshua Novacek, a 30-year-old research engineer, instrumental in putting together this comprehensive study called the Interconnections Seam Study, or just SEAMS. The study showed, citing from the article, stronger connections between the U.S. power systems, massive eastern and western power grids would accelerate the growth of wind and solar, hugely reduce American reliance on coal, and save billions. On July 26, 2018, Bloom was center stage at a grid symposium in Iowa, releasing the study's findings. Bloom was on fire, speaking on his feet without notes for nearly 2 hours. We've been imagining a cleaner, bigger, modern grid for about 40 years, says Bloom. And now is the time to make it happen. Only Bloom wasn't thinking Donald Trump's the president. Bloom showed off his team's sophisticated methodology using high-resolution video, simulations, One simulation showed a hypothetical heat wave in 2038, causing air conditioners to drive up power demand. Now that's another thing. Climate change is causing the need for more power. But if you watch my other video about underreported renewable energy sources, you know there's a really cool energy source called geothermal heating and cooling. How we can cool and heat our homes without needing so much electricity. In the simulations, as the rising sun swept across the US, yellow circles representing solar plants expanded. Surplus power from solar plants in the west flooded eastward, limiting the need for pricier and dirtier Midwestern coal power. And as the sun set, the Midwest's expansive wind farms began to spin, sending power westward, minimizing use of the West coal, and this time they add gas-fired generators. Remember, natural gas adds a lot of methane to our environment. And the simulations demonstrated that the savings in fuel and equipment more than paid for the added transmission. And the benefits were particularly dramatic for the carbon price scenario, meaning where they added in, what if we charge for carbon? It would eliminate 35 megatons of CO2 emissions a year by 2038, equivalent to the current annual carbon emissions from U.S. natural gas productions and distribution. And from a moolah standpoint, this is money, old-time slang for money. From a moolah standpoint, it would return about $2.50 or more for every $1 invested in transmission. More, this seams expansion would lead to greater enhanced grid resilience, meaning, well, if you got one of these climate-driven natural disasters, you're seeing power outages. Now, because it's interconnected really nicely, you can keep the power flowing. But, quoting from the article, a study like Seams was politically dangerous territory for a federally funded lab, while coal industry advocates and climate change deniers reign in the White House. So now in August of 2018, Novacek was given a talk at a symposium. And the assistant secretary in the U.S. Department of Energy, who, according to the article, is a coal industry, a fossil fuel industry advocate, was quite upset and sent off an email right during Novacek's talk. Well, this email was part of what ignited a firestorm, using the article's words. That fateful email reached the second in command to then Secretary of Energy, Rick Perry. Secretary Perry was under pressure to stem the bleeding in America's struggling coal industry. So he, according to the article, rather than looking at grid efficiency, wanted to frame coal and nuclear power plants as the protector against extreme weather and secure our resilience that way. And coal and nuclear plants store their fuel right on site. Now imagine you got one of these climate-driven hurricanes, extreme weather events, wildfires raging through your nuclear power plant area or your coal plant, and that's going to be spreading around a lot of toxic waste. Now here we're getting into how the Trump administration has been shutting these studies down. In May of 2018, the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, or ERIE, circulated an enhanced list of what they call Tier 1 topics that require political appointee sign-off. Tier 1 included anything related to grid reliability or projections of the entire energy sectors, such as fossil fuels or renewable energy. NREL, or National Renewable Energy Laboratory, emails show that SEAM study came under scrutiny. Novacek wrote in one email that researchers were, quote, not allowed to show any results without direct approval from the DOE, Department of Energy. Career DOE employees had approved those conference talks, but had not alerted ERIE's political appointees. They thought expanded disclosure requirements were supposed to exempt conference talks. DOE higher-ups complained to the acting administrator running ERIE, and insiders say she was livid. So she then ordered a clampdown on the SEAM study and appointed this young man who had connections prior to being appointed to the Koch industries, into the Koch-funded fossil fuel industry think tanks. So according to the article, the lab grounded Bloom and Novacek, prohibiting them from presenting the SEAM study or results, or even discussing the study outside of NREL. And the 1.6 million study itself disappeared. NREL yanked the completed findings from its website, deleted the power flow visualizations from the YouTube channel. That paper remains blocked 2 years later. And the article goes on to say these are the only scientific studies that have been squelched by political appointees from the Trump administration, especially those related to climate change. So I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please remember to subscribe. Click that notification bell so you know when I'm putting up a new one. And share the videos. Comment, mannerly preferred. Like. And until next time, peace be with you.